There's a meeting this Friday, but it's of the working group.
To get ready.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody, I apologize for the delay. Was having some technical difficulties, but we are live and you can go. Make sure your microphones are on.
How do you do that?
See, and it turns green.
There you go.
Patrick's tape.
You're on.
Is that on?
It's on. You're good to go.
See,
It's on.
green. When it's green, it's on. At least for microphones.
All right, here we are for the special meeting of the Prospect City Council to consider the use of ARPA funds. And we have with us Mr. Long from the Kentucky League of Cities as the facilitator. Mr. Long, what we'd like to do is to hear from citizens not on the city council first, and then we'll turn to the city council for their discussion. So I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Long, for you to facilitate.
Okay. So, Mayor, can you tell me how many folks want to speak as citizens first? Is that what did I hear you correctly?
Yes, we have one here in the council room, and we have two that I can identify, Mrs. Wardell and Mr. Tucci, who are on WebEx. You see their pictures up there.
Okay.
And as far as I know, that's it.
Okay. That'll be fine. So let me do a couple of housekeeping things before we get started, and then we'll roll into their comments, and we appreciate everyone being here today. So I'm sure that you have seen the results of the survey, and it's a long list, right? And so part of my job today is to try to help focus the discussion and get down to the priorities and help you get to where you need to be. And I'm going to do my very best to do that. I'm going to ask that you speak one at a time, and that would be nice. And if you have someone taking notes, that would be good. Sarah Stoll, wave your hand, Sarah. She's my colleague here, and she's going to work with me in taking a set of notes as well. We just want to be sure that we get everything down and get it all captured correctly. This will be a little informal. I want you to feel free to engage in discussion, and we will take short breaks along the way because I know probably everyone has had coffee and water and all sorts of things, and we'll stand and stretch for just a couple of minutes. So I want you to feel good about what we're doing today and not feel like that it's overwhelming. So what I would like to do, first of all, if I could, is ask for the mayor and council members to identify themselves so that we know where we are. Some of you I've met, some of you I have not. And then the other folks that are on, if you would introduce yourself as well. And let's just go ahead and get that done first so that we know who's present.
Frank, you want to lead off?
Frank Fulcher,
Frank's on the city council.
City Council.
I'm John Evans. I'm the mayor.
Sandra Leonard, City Council.
Good morning, Greg Hulsman, City Council.
Doug Farnsley, City Council.
John Gibson, City Council.
And Sarah Odell, also on the council.
Right. Now, do we have anyone else from the city who works for the city on with us?
John Carter, City Clerk.
John?
Ron Cundiff, I'm the Director of Public Works.
Right. Anyone else?
I'm Linda Wardell. I chair the Prospect Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee.
Lee Tucci, Forestation Board Chairman.
And that's it.
Okay. Great. All right, so let's start this way. Ms. Wardell, would you mind to speak with us first and to speak up and share your thoughts and ideas, what you would like to say to the mayor and the council? We appreciate it.
Certainly. I was asked earlier to identify projects that I would like to request funding from the ARPA funds. I focused on the current fiscal year because I know some of that money is available now. My committee has done a fair amount of work identifying a spot in the park. There's currently, at the beginning of one of our trails, there's a culvert. We would like to remove the culvert, replace it with a bridge. And I provided to the council members meeting minutes from our special committee where my committee made a recommendation to council for spending the funds. And also I submitted the budget request for this bridge. The total recommended budget is $82,000. And I also provided to the council members the rationale for replacing the culvert with the bridge. And I can summarize that quickly if you would like me to. Otherwise, I think the council members all have the information that they need to discuss it.
Okay. So would you please give me the first budget number that you gave me for replacing, I believe it was replacing the bridge. Was it 18,000? Did I hear that correct?
No, it's $82,000.
Oh, 82. Oh, quite a difference.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And that includes the cost of the bridge itself, the installation, the foundation, abutments. It's a kind of the total package.
Okay. Can you give us a total of the budget and culvert without, I don't think that we want to get way down in the weeds, but can you give us a total number that we're looking at for both?
That is the total number.
That's the total for all of it?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, excellent.
That's correct.
Is there anything else that you would like to add?
I have not yet looked at putting together a budget request for next year. There are things that I think would be appropriate for ARPA funds for the next fiscal year. We're in the middle of a project to remove a lot of invasive plants in our parks and natural areas. I would like that to continue. I don't have a specific number. We've been spending in the neighborhood of $10,000 to $15,000 a year on that, and I would see that continuing at least for another year or two. And I think that is appropriate for ARPA money. And otherwise, it's kind of, routine maintenance and development in the parks, replacing bridges and trails, purchasing equipment that Public Works needs to do their job. But I don't have specific numbers beyond this one particular.
Okay.
I would say that, as I understand it, the citizen responses to the survey indicated a desire to connect neighborhoods, have multi-use trails, sidewalks. While that is not specifically part of my committee, we basically make recommendations for parks, but it is recreation. And I think the ability for our citizens to be able to get from their houses to other places in the city or to the parks without having to get in a car and drive on US 42 would be a great advantage.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
I have a question, please.
Sure.
Before we get too far into specific projects, I think it'd be enlightening to let everyone know how much is available in ARPA funds, how much is currently available, how much is we anticipate, and how much is already committed. you got to have a framework for making some of these decisions.
Okay. Who has those numbers?
I could do it, but I'd rather toss that one over to John Carter.
Okay.
Hang on just 1 second. Sure I'm correct in this. I'm going to look it up and I'll confirm, but I believe it's 637 in 2 tranches. So the first one was already been received this past July. There's currently an amended budget that's had a first reading that's proposed how to spend the first tranche for this current fiscal year. And the second tranche should be received sometime in July of 2022.
John, is that 637 in 2 tranches? Is that 637 each or 637 divided by 2?
Times 2. So it's
Time.
about 1.2.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Thank you.
Has any of that been committed already?
It has not, because you're currently entertaining, I take that back. 308,000 of it has been in the current budget. The remainder has been added to the amended budget that's to receive a second reading at the next regular council meeting.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah.
Can you tell us what the 300,000 is committed to, so we don't have to talk about that if we've already done it?
I think the answer is the entire budget.
That was 450.
You had to give me a second to pull up the budget ordinance last year.
It's 300 is part of general revenue.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing is correct. It's just part of the general funds at this point, isn't it? The 308.
So it's being used to
Yes.
balance the budget and may or may not be something that's appropriate with ARPA funds.
Well, as I understand it, ARPA funds can be used for any government function.
That's correct. Any government service.
That's correct.
So let me ask you this question. This might be a simplistic question, but John, in the budget, a proposed budget or the budget that has this 308 in it, was that money allocated to specific projects, or was it just put into the general fund in categories, and we're going to assign priorities to them today, or is it a mixture of both?
The answer is B.
Mixture.
Gotcha. Okay. If we start going around and around the table, so to speak, and talking about specific projects, if one is already in the budget, would you have the well, I won't say presence of mind, that's not the word, but would you be able to point out that we have already budgeted for that, so that way we could make note of that? Would that be an easier way to do this, rather than trying to go through and pick them all out?
I think I can do that. I just got to put my hand on a couple things here real quick. So while y'all discuss, I can certainly have that information at hand by the time we get to it.
Sure. I appreciate that. If that's okay with everyone, I think that'll save us some time. Let's see, Ms. Wardle, I think has Mr. Tucci. Would you like to go next?
Yes, I can do that.
Okay.
I'm talking about our next fiscal year requirements. Fiscal year begins July 1. There's two special fundings that I'm interested in. One is jointly actually with Linda Wardell, $4,500 to address honeysuckle, declining trees, and vines killing in trees along Timber Ridge Road, running almost from Route 42 to Putney Lane. There's a large gully, deep gully, just totally saturated with invasive species, dead trees, and the surviving trees, most of them have a heavy vine growth that needs cut back. The terrain there is pretty rough because of the deep gully and the intense amount of honeysuckle there that needs removed. Would really require professional work rather than something that could be done by volunteers on a safe and efficient basis.
Okay.
The second item,
Before you do that, could we have the amount of money again, please?
$4,500, and that is
Thank you.
that is a back of the envelope estimate that Linda Wardell got from the current vendor who's doing the invasive species removal already.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm
Thank you.
sorry, I had to take a phone call, so I missed part of what Lee said. But the other thing that I would mention is that, as we've learned with other invasive plant removals, you typically need to treat it at least one more time to catch anything that inadvertently got missed the first time around, and also anything that might sprout from roots. And maybe you said that, Lee, I don't know, but.
No, I didn't say that. But that
You're
would
talking about 4,500 times 2 at least, correct?
Yeah, and it would be, 4,500 this season, and then for the next season. But I understand that ARPA funds can be used into, I guess, our fiscal year 24. So.
Okay.
Anyway.
All right.
Okay, let me just correct the record. Just for the record, let me mention that the amount of the first tranche is 635,097. And that's exactly the same amount we'll get in July. So we have a total of 1.270 to spend. The 308,000 that was allocated in the last year budget is just part of the general budget.
Okay.
And that was considered at the time to be lost income per the initial guidance from the U.S. Treasury. Those
Gotcha.
terms have since changed.
That was based on the formula, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, John. Mr. Tootsie, what was your other point?
The other funding item we're interested in is $3,000 next fiscal year for watering recently planted trees. We're planting in both irrigated and non-irrigated areas, and it's very difficult to predict the watering needs because that's really a function of drought in July, August, September, whatever.
You said three.
Before the rains come back or the trees settle in, and the newly planted trees need to be watered at least once a week during dry periods. And I've estimated a $3,000 need that would be above and beyond our normal budget items for station board.
Would you give me that number again?
Yes, 3,000.
3,000. Okay. Thank you.
Right, that's it.
And who would that be paid to?
That would be paid to an outside contractor if and when the need really arises for watering. And the maintenance department for the city of Prospect, which has been doing watering, is overloaded with other projects at the time and can't do the watering. They have done the watering for us, and they might be able to do all of it again, but maybe not. And we have one written bid from an outside vendor, which I've used. We're presently looking for another or lower quote.
Okay. Very good. Anything else? Ms. Wardell, did we get everything from you? Mr. Tucci, we got everything that you wanted to say? For now? Okay. Was there someone else, Mayor, that I've missed?
Herb Schulhofer, who's here in the council room and is just approaching the podium.
Okay. Mr. Shohan, would you mind to spell your last name for me? I want to make sure I get it correct.
Okay, is the speaker on?
Yes.
Okay, the name is Herb Schulhafer. Schulhaf is in Frank E.R. And I live at 2 Autumn Hill Court. And here to talk to the mayor and the council.
I don't think Herb's mic is on.
I don't think it is either. I'm having problem hearing. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
There you
hope I
are.
spell-
Spell
I
your
hope I
last
spell
name
it.
for me again, Herb.
Yeah, I hope I spell it correct this time. Schulhafer. Schulhafer.
Gotcha. Thank you so much.
We were in Germany, it'd be Schulhofer, but I'm here in Prospect. I live in
gotcha.
Autumn Hill, number 2 Autumn Hill Court. But I wish to voice my support for the proposed improvements to Little Honey Creek Park. These improvements being a new parking area, a playground, a picnic area, water fountain, some seating, pavilion, sidewalks, and a sidewalk connection to City Hall. You know, we were fortunate, we have a multi-use civic building right here in Prospect. It's houses the city government, the council chambers, the police, a library, and we have this Little Honey Creek Park right adjacent to this City Hall. And it's a fairly large park, and it's a place for opportunity. This is really an opportunity to make the City Hall and the park a Prospect place. A place where people can bring their children, their grandchildren, to play, to have stories read to them. I've had experience in designing libraries, and most libraries I've been involved, they've had outdoor reading areas, and I could see where this could be a really fantastic storytelling area. I will admit, I look around my new neighbors, and I see much younger neighbors. I see the school buses every morning, and so I think there's some changes in Honey Creek than from the past. But anyway, this place, it can have many community activities. I think where the residents of Prospect can gather together and really have enjoyment. I've lived in many neighborhoods in the Louisville area, Crescent Hill, the Highlands, where they have places, and we're fortunate the city really supports a 4th of July that brings many people together. But still, I happen to reside in the neighborhood and see the parade. It goes right by my house. But I know other residents of Prospect have to travel there. And one other, I think, a positive, I'll tell you one thing, I really like living in Prospect. I think it's a neat place. I think it has the opportunity to be a better place. And that's why I really think this civic place, we consider it now a civic place. And also it's a good place to connect neighborhoods. We got neighborhoods, and I hear people talk about it. And I see the walkability, the walking interest in people. And, but I could see where many people, this would be another place to walk to, a neat destination. So I really just ask your support in using the Prospect ARPA funds to make these proposed improvements to our civic place. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schulhofer. Appreciate that very much. Anything else before we move on to our?
I believe we missed David Holmes. David, you're on mute.
Mr. Holmes, can you hear me? If you can, I'm having problems hearing you. I'm so sorry.
His microphone is still on mute.
He probably stepped away. I'll text him.
Okay. And while we're waiting, maybe I've missed one. Who is Chris that's identified on here? I don't see a face.
To adjust to the surgery.
David has replied to me, said he's not planning on speaking.
I go to Cincinnati
Okay.
for some specials to have it done.
All right. Okay. Is that everyone, Mayor?
Yes, sir.
All right. So what I would like to do to get the mayor and the council started in thinking about the direction that they want to head, I thought it would be good if we would take a few minutes and go around and, regardless of the survey and in the 24 pages we need to get through and those sorts of things, I want to hear from you right off the bat the things that are priorities for you. You hear, your constituents, you're out and about a lot, and I think that we could make some really good progress if we just started off with a very general discussion about this. If I had to make two things my priority, this is what they would be. And so if we could do that, is that okay with everyone?
All answered for me. Yes, that's fine.
Okay. Mayor, since you are the mayor, you have a choice. You can lead off the discussion or you can wait to hear everyone else and wind up at the end. Which would you rather do?
I think I'll be like the Indians and let the other Indians speak first.
Okay, gotcha. All right. So I'm going to start with Doug Farnsley, and I don't mean to put you on the spot. I can come back to you, but I would really like to get started. So are there one or two things right off the bat that you saw in the survey or that you've observed in your time as a council member that you believe should be a couple of priority things that you need to work on?
Thanks, Tad. My priorities would be walkability, connectivity, sidewalks, improvement to existing sidewalks, addition of new sidewalks where appropriate. We had a good study done in 2010 that put out a pretty comprehensive plan for walkability and connectivity of the neighborhoods and even the commercial area. So I would be very much in favor of using a portion of the ARPA funds to begin tackling those recommendations. I'm a big supporter of the parks, so the recommendations from the parks are things that I'm inclined to support. And then Sandra proposed, or I don't know that she proposed it, but she noted that some of the survey responses talked about some sort of tax break, and I would be in favor of a portion of the funds going into something like that. So that's sort of my overview, my priorities.
Very good. Thank you, Doug. Frank Fulcher, I'll go with you next.
I support pretty much what Doug has just said. The connectivity has been an issue. I've lived here 41 years, and maybe 5 years after I arrived, I came to City Hall and says, I'll donate my backyard to a sidewalk. My backyard's on 42, and I was told that that's just not, that's not something this city is prepared to do. So I support the connectivity issue. As an engineer, the practicality of that has me scratching my head somewhat because it requires, in some cases, it requires acquisition of either right away or property for the city, which is of course expensive, but that could be part of the ARPA funds if it was planned properly. And the second thing, and also agree with Doug, I think the parks, not Little Honey Creek Park. I think that our major park requires the bridge. I support that to the extent that as I told the mayor earlier, I think we nickel dime the parks. If we're going to do it and we have the money, let's do it right. That our parks are not senior sensitive, they're not handicap sensitive, and we just keep, well, let me go back to the Linda's issue of invasive plants. We had allocated twice the money that the park said they wanted to use. They didn't use the money that was in the budget for getting rid of invasive plants when they had the opportunity. So I would like to see us spend money and do it right and do it once and not have projects that have ongoing maintenance expense associated with them. And there's the infrastructure issue also that we've discussed and have not done much with, and that's the roads. Now, not every road, but just the entrance to Hunting Creek, where the pavers are pushed up. They've been that way for a year. We need to do something positive to make that have a long-term solution, because that's an every year expense. If we could take ARPA money, get rid of some of those brick pavers at the exit, I think it would be money well spent.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry if my typewriter or my keyboard is clacking. I'm trying to take notes as we go along, so I hope you'll bear with me on that. Thank you for sharing that, and that is one of the things that we'll want to get into a little bit deeper is in terms of things that can be one-time expenditures and things that will have ongoing maintenance, and how the city anticipates handling that. So thank you for kind of pointing that out as we go along. Next, I'm going to call on Don Gibson.
I'd like to see the ARP funds spent on something substantial, something that's going to make a difference in the city of Prospect, something for the majority of the citizens of the city of Prospect. I support what Doug and Frank said about connectivity. That really hit me in looking at the survey as well as talking to people. I think there is a unique opportunity to maximize a park in Putney Pond and connect the northern neighborhoods with a boardwalk through the Putney Pond area that would connect the landings with the other northern communities.
Okay. Anything else?
No, sir.
All right. I appreciate that. Thank you. Next, I'm going to call on Greg Hulsman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Long. First of all, some citizens are watching this, so I want them to know how much we appreciate the flood of responses that we got. Much appreciated, and so grateful that so many citizens are involved and participating in our community. So thank you all for that. Can I give you four? I have four actually that are my top four. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
So for the last 2.5 years, I've been working on a project that involves lighting. So to me, US 42 is very dark at night. Not all of it, but a lot of it. And I think lighting would help in many ways. I think it would help with safety, but I also think it has an aesthetic nature to it as well. So I'm not talking about lighting the entire section of US 42, but a couple of years ago, I was involved in a study, and for about 300,000, we could light at 100-foot increments, what I call the central part of Prospect, or Prospect Central. So that to me is a high-ranking item, because I think it would look good, and I think it would improve the safety, and not just with accidents car to car, but there are a lot of animals on US 42 as well, and so deer collisions and so on. So
Hey,
number
Greg.
two from, yes.
And pardon me for interrupting you, but this is a question that as I was reading through this, I wanted to inquire, and I think now would be a good time, is distinguishing or differentiating between things of which the city has control of and things which they do not. And so when it comes to highways, I've not dealt with a lot of the highways in Jefferson County and in all the cities that we've worked in. But I do know that sometimes you can do things on state highways, federal highways, and other times it's city streets and metro streets and all those different things. So, but I really wanted some clarification from you all. Is US 42 a state highway? Is that something that the city can control and put signs on and it's lighting on and that sort of stuff?
No, it's a federal highway, but it's run by the state through the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. Currently, we have a study going on, largely funded, not entirely, but largely funded by KIPTA. And that's been going on now for 2 or 3 months and will be completed the middle of this summer. And that deals with this US 42 that comes through the center of the city.
Okay. All right. So, the KIPTA study, once that's done, then the city, I assume, will have a better idea of the things that it's going to be able to impact and the things that metro government may impact, the thing that Federal Highway Administration may do through the Transportation Cabinet and all that. Is that correct? Am I hearing that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Greg. I'm sorry to interrupt your train of thought, but that's one that as I was going through this, I really want to make sure I got clarification on.
No, that's an excellent question. Thank you for asking that. So number two for me would be walkways, or you could call it connectivity. We keep seeing this over and over. As I have campaigned and also in the survey, that's an important issue. People want to be able to get around. So that would be number two for me.
Okay.
I happen to live on I'll call it the north side of 42. I live in Sutherland. And so I would be remiss if I didn't include drainage concerns. And one of the survey questions was, along with MSD, working on mitigation of those kinds of problems. It's a huge concern for that side of the highway where the land is lower. And there are new developments already in process and some other ones proposed. So that's a concern to me. And I don't think I'd be representing the citizens well if I didn't say that. And number four for me would be City Hall. I don't know what it would cost yet, but we have 3 different kinds of brick and 3 different kinds of shutters on this building. And I just think since it is so visible, I don't think it would cost a whole lot, but I say that and I don't really know what it would cost. But I would like to paint City Hall so that it would look more modern and cohesive. I think it would be very attractive. So those are my top 4.
Okay. Thank you very much, Greg. And I'm going to go to Sandra Leonard next.
Okay, I'm going to start where Greg left off. I'm an old lady and I've been here on the council for a long time, and City Hall has never looked worse. The roof has leaked in different places for years. The carpets have worn out in a number of areas or at least need cleaning. The seats that are here in the council chambers have not been cleaned in 20 years. And on top of that, I absolutely agree with Greg. Not only does the outside look bad, there are places where the paint is actually is coming off, and all the shutters probably need replacing. So While that may not have been my highest priority, it's certainly one of them. I also am concerned with the infrastructure of the city. We became a city in 1974. Some of our infrastructure predates that. Some of our early streets went in 1964 in terms of the subdivisions. We have never had a professional survey of the entire city to look at potential infrastructure concerns. Greg highlighted one of them in terms of drainage. Sutherland was a swamp that became a subdivision. But there are other places in our city, because this city is a conduit for all of the drainage that is taking place that goes into Harrods Creek. And that means some of our culverts, some of our dams and whatnot very probably will need replacement. And if one of them goes out, we could have problems. I think also a professional survey would help us if it could leverage some of the impact that we have with MSD. They keep saying nothing's going to happen to today, so maybe we'll take care of something tomorrow. I agree absolutely with connectivity, and I agree with Frank Fulcher in the fact that there are a lot, it's wonderful to say it. I walk all the time. I believe in walking. I'm an old woman, as I said. But by the same token, we don't have a lot of places that we have access to put in sidewalks. The sidewalks in great part that exist in this city are not the city's. Sutherland, for example, has sidewalks. I live there too, and I'm responsible for the sidewalk in front of my house. I think that when we do sidewalks, we need to be careful that we're not taking on a much larger long-term maintenance issue than we'll ever have the money to take care of. That doesn't mean we can't do anything. It means we need to do it with a lot of thought and a lot of common sense. And I totally agree with Mr. Farnsley. I wasn't particularly thinking about the tax break until I took a look at the comments from the citizens. But when I did, I realized that that goes over and over and over. And this year in particular, that is a very big deal, because while we have not received any of the information yet, we have all been subject to having our houses reevaluated. And people who have already seen some of the data tell me we're going to be in for a very unpleasant surprise, because the numbers have come up this year. That's pretty much
May I ask
it.
a question? I don't want
Sure.
to interrupt your train of thought, but I meant to ask this earlier. When you talk about tax break, are there specific taxes or revenue streams that you were considering, or is it just across the board? You want to see what the impact is, and if you don't want to commit at this time, it's okay. I just want to make sure I understand.
That's excellent. That's a very good question. Our two primary sources of income are property tax and insurance premium tax. And I think that the property tax is the one that probably would be the most beneficial to the largest number of residents.
I'd like to ask a question on the subject of taxation. Early on with the federal funds, there was a prohibition of using of any municipality, whatever, using the money for tax breaks. And I'm sure that was a condition early on. Is that still the case? Anybody know?
I don't know. From the KLC side, I can tell you that if no one there knows, Joseph Coleman on our staff is the guru of ARPA, CARES, and infrastructure money, and I'm sure that he can provide you guidance on that. I'll give you his number. If you call in the 800 number, his extension is 3715. Joseph
Got his
Coleman.
contact. I think you're right, Frank. I will follow up with Mr. Coleman now.
Thank you.
Well, and it doesn't mean that there are not other approaches where
Right.
instead of a direct activity, we would be funding something that we probably couldn't do otherwise legally. And that would be not a claim on our general fund.
In my opinion, I think we're going to see a lot of creativity in how money gets shuffled around. So we'll see.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else, Ms. Leonard?
No, thank you.
All right, great. And Sarah Odell.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I'll echo the others with connections and including in that both building new sidewalks and then repairing the older sidewalks. I think there is a way to be able to do that through our talking with our attorney and then using the pay, but I don't think anyone is taking responsibility to repair their own sidewalk. So I think it would be great because, like, I have a daughter and she trips on those all the time and falls over. She doesn't get hurt really bad, but I think there's potential that somebody could. And so I do think that goes to the showing that we care about our city. So I think installing new ones, because that's clearly a trend even from back in 2010, and then fixing the current sidewalks. I also think that with the connection thing, just as an idea, I never knew that for Putney Pond, and each of our parks are not that old in terms of parks terms, so close to a decade or so. But the original plans for Putney Pond, I never knew actually included a boardwalk. I don't think the original design had it connecting all the way to City Hall, but I think that creating and amplifying Putney Pond as a beautiful resource we have, that a boardwalk, there'd be some engineering things we have to take on. Obviously, there is some planning with that, but as an idea that Don had mentioned, a boardwalk that would go through Putney Pond and then even make some kind of connection up to City Hall, and you'd connect that whole side of US 42. Basically, every neighborhood would then be connected, with the exception of Bridgepoint, unfortunately, and that one is a bit of a logistic issue. But the fact that it was an original idea from more than a decade ago, I think is really neat if we have this once in a lifetime opportunity to kind of create an impact. And then in general, just maintaining the parks. It's in every realtor listing, people brag about the Parks for Prospect. I think it shows that we have a great community, young and old, that can participate with each other. And so I'm always an advocate for that. And then my last thing, it's kind of two things put together, and I'm not sure how they would be done, but just as an idea, the lowering of taxes of some way through some action, whether it's a rebate or a lowering, or even the other idea that people kind of hinted at in terms of give money back for employee salaries. This is a little bit of an aside, but that's going to come up in the budget. And I'd love to be able to look into how do we compensate our employees during this time of excessive inflation, but hopefully not have a lasting impact on our pension contributions down the road. So if there's a way to use ARPA funds, whether it's through the premium pay piece or some creative measure to be able to pay them appropriately for this time period and inflation, but not hold that burden forever, I think would be wise. And then, yeah, I'm up for anything we can do to help with the property taxes. And I'm not sure, that may not be ARPA funds. That may just be through something else. And I'm not sure the legality, but just since we're talking about ideas, I think those are things that I would advocate for.
Thank you. I think I am now down to Mayor Evans.
Well, I suppose it had to come to that.
It eventually comes around, doesn't it?
Always. I agree with all the sentiments I've heard about the connectivity, and it is in line with the survey that we took. That was a priority of many of our residents. I'd like to put a sidewalk across Frank's backyard since he brought it up. Actually, truthfully, I think connecting Hunting Creek all the way down to Fox Harbor and City Hall would be a great idea. Also connecting the landings, and Don Gibson came up with this example from a place he knows in Florida where they build a boardwalk across. And I've discussed this with our public works guy, Ron Cundiff, and actually he has laid it out in such a way it would cost about roughly $200,000 to build that boardwalk from behind City Hall all the way across Putney Pond. And I think that'd be a great idea. Putting sidewalks over in the commercial area, as I think Frank mentioned, has some problems of acquiring rights of way, easements, that sort of thing. I think we should look at that. Back a few years ago, there was a proposal that actually passed city council to put a walking path across that area. But the problem that we ran into was that there are so many driveways, if you want to call them that, places where people go in and out to this establishment or that, the State Farm, the animal clinic, the FedEx place or the UPS place and so forth. I think when we talked about this back 2-3 years ago, it was 19, something like that,
17 to 21
driveways that such a sidewalk or walking path would have to go across, which, as long as those driveways are there, I mean, that would be creating a danger to put a walking path where cars are going in and out. And I know from experience, when you come down and you want to turn into one of those places, yeah, you slow down, but you're still going maybe 20 miles an hour when you swing in there. So that's something we could look at, but I don't know the answer to that. It would be good if we could do it, but I don't know how we're going to do it. Unless there's a way that we could put the pathway behind the businesses to go from, say, Dairy Queen all the way over to the Kroger Center and cut across the edge of what used to be Exceptional Living or whatever it was called.
Cars Law Court.
Yeah, that area in there. It's something we can look at, but as far as putting sidewalks over there, that's going to be difficult. Not to say impossible, but it's not an easy fix. Putting the boardwalk across from Putney Pond over to City Hall, we'd have to take a look at whether there's any property that we'd have to acquire or not. I don't know the answer to that. The answer might be no, we don't. So connectivity is a priority. I agree with Herb Schulhofer about Little Hunting Creek Park and developing that as a community destination. I won't say any more, but I think that's very desirable. And some money is already in the budget right now for developing that. As to the parks generally, I agree with Frank, which doesn't happen every day, but it happens today. He says, do it once and do it right. And I agree with that. Greg mentioned painting City Hall. Sandra mentioned other things about City Hall that need fixing. That did not score very high on the survey, but nevertheless, I think it's important that we do it. The front door right here that I'm pointing at, that has needed replacing for some time. Reason it hasn't been replaced yet, it wasn't in the budget. It's in the proposed amended budget. And as soon as, if that passes, we've got a proposal to do it. But we didn't have the money in the budget to do it. As far as the leaky roof, that comes from the cupola, if I'm pronouncing that right. I've never known how you say that. C-U-P-O-L-A. There are two ways we can go about that. And it depends what the council wants to do. But if we remove the cupola, it would be far less expensive than if we kept it. But that's where the water's coming in, according to our public works guy. As far as painting City Hall and getting new shutters, I think that's a good idea. We have a appointment, Greg Hulsman and I, with a painting contractor who's going to give us a back of the envelope estimate of what that would cost. So that's a possibility, and I think it's a desirable use of the money. As far as what we do about city taxes, I think we need to talk with Joe Coleman at Kentucky League of Cities and get his advice. And I think we also need to talk with our advisors at KIPTA about that use of the money. That exhausts my suggestions.
All right, very good. Well, I thank all of you for this little exercise. I think that this paints a fairly clear picture of the things that y'all have in common and the things that are most important to each one. And I wanted to do this before we did any kind of deep dive into all the results from the survey, because there's certainly a lot of stuff there. I wanted to ask a question. Let's see. There was something about KIPTA. You were doing a study.
Yeah, you want me to talk about that?
Yeah. So the US 42,
Well, it started out at least 2 years ago. Greg Hulsman came driving through Simpsonville, and they had put street lights and sidewalks, pretty brick sidewalks through. They have the same problem we do. They've got a big highway that goes right through the center of town. And he brought pictures back showing what they had done. And we decided we wanted to take a good look, and we did, at what it would be involved in putting nice streetlights along US 42. And he and I and some others are still very much in favor of doing that, at least to some extent. Well, we approached KIPTA for a grant, an 80-20 grant to do that. And we came close, but we didn't get the grant. What we got instead was a grant to do a safety study of US 42. So we went through all the procedures that are required to identify and hire an engineering company to do that study. And we went through all that, and we wound up choosing one. And they have begun a couple of months ago working on that study, the existing conditions and so forth. In fact, we got a meeting with them, I believe it's this Friday. And they'll have their study completed by the middle of this summer. So
Okay.
that's in the works. And you know what the recommendations are going to be, I don't know. I mean, they could be anything from doing some street lighting to putting in some different left turns to installing some roundabouts instead of crosswise intersections. We don't know. We won't know until we get the results of the study, but that has been going on for 3 or 4 months now.
Okay, thank you for that. When you said Simpsonville, I knew exactly where you were going, so that was very helpful. Thank you. So, you know, I'm going to make an assumption here that the things that each of you have said really are in from your viewpoint at the very top of the priority list of things that you would like to see done. I will say, and I appreciate you saying this, Mayor, that sometimes the things that are the most popular may not be the things that are the most urgent. And I hear this a lot when people talk about doing something to City Hall. It's not something that really impacts a lot of people except the ones that work there and meet there. So it doesn't rank nearly as high sometimes, but those things have to be done. So what I would like to do, there were a number of questions in various categories that were asked, and I don't want to go back through and repeat all the stuff that you just said. What I would like to do is to take each one of those categories and ask you to help me pull out the things that you believe rank the highest in each category, so that when we get through with this, you've got a list of the 2, 3, 4 things that are important. And if there's not anything in there then that's okay too. And the very first category is a very good example of what I'm talking about. There were some mentions of creating new welcome signs for the city. And so in order to explain what I'm getting at on this, welcome signs are generally any visitor's first impression of a community. They may not rank highly with people who live in the community, but for people who coming in, they set the tone for what they expect from your city. So that might be something that you might want to consider. Or you might already be happy with the signage that you have, and that's not something that you want to spend these types of funds for. So you see the argument, the different sides of this as we go through each one. So I'm going to start off with welcome sign, just so that we address it. This is our way of addressing everything that's in the 24-page document. We want to see what rises to the top and what the funding priorities were, even if we don't have the the cost. Some of these things, many of these things are depending on studies, putting out RFQs, RFPs, getting estimates, bids, that sort of thing. But it's good to have a working list then, so that you can go to contractors or put out your request for proposals. Does that sound like a workable plan for everyone?
Actually, the only thing that doesn't, I'm not against it, I'm for it. But the only thing it doesn't address is the fact that some of us do not know where the items on the survey came from. Certainly there are a number of us who did not have input into that. So by doing what you've suggested, we need to recognize the fact that there are broader issues that have never been addressed.
And I appreciate that. And I appreciate you bringing that up, because that is a parallel thing that goes with this. And that is anytime that you're doing surveying, if you don't have folks register with the survey, so you don't know where it came, anybody could have responded. The other thing is that you have a small sampling of folks who responded. So you may not be hearing from the majority. And so what I would tell you is that, the elected officials are the ones who have their ear closest to the pavement. You all hear what's going on. You get stopped in the grocery store. You get calls at midnight, and I know, I mean, I've been there. So, just because it's on the survey or not on the survey does not mean that it has to be a priority item at all. What you have here is a 24-page working list of projects that somebody or someone mentioned. That's all that it is. And so what I want us to do is to go through each one of these categories. And if there's something there that's worthy of your consideration that you think is really important, then let's jot that down. If there's something that was not mentioned at all, that that's important because you've heard from your constituents, then let's add that to the list too. So that's kind of what I'm getting at. I appreciate you saying that, because that is true. This could be a very small sampling of the community. So if it's all right, let's see how this goes, and let's just talk about welcome signage for a moment. How does the entrance to your city, all the entrances, how many entrances do you have? You have numerous entrances?
Essentially 2, except for River Road coming in, which would make it a 3.
What is your impression of things coming in?
What do you mean? What's my impression?
So my question is welcome signage something that this money should be considered for? Is that something that the city needs, or is this, we just move on from this one? We can take care of that ourselves if we need to.
Can I tell him about when you know?
Yeah, I was just going to do that.
Okay.
You do it.
The mayor and I looked at this a number of years ago.
Okay.
And the primary area that could use a sign is when we come off of the Snyder and hit 42. The difficulty with that is he and I walked around and everything else. There are bluffs, there's limestone. There just isn't a physical location.
No place to
for
put
a
it.
sign. And the other areas that we might put a sign, you're already here. So in my mind, anyway, while I think signs are an interesting phenomenon, I wouldn't want to spend this money on a sign, because the primary place for it, we can't put one because it won't take one.
There's another consideration with signage, and that is the irregularity of our boundaries. many of the responses in this survey were from people who really didn't recognize what is in the city of Prospect. So there are multiple, quote, entrances and exits. But I'm not in favor of spending any more money on entrance signs.
All right, that's what I needed to hear. And so what we're doing by doing this is that we want to we want to honor the things that were mentioned, but they're not all priorities. So that's just what we're doing. I want to go through the various questions that were asked, and then when we get down to the end, is there anything that wasn't asked? Is there anything that became apparent to you through this process, or that you've heard that didn't make the survey? So this is not all exhaustive as we go through, but these are the questions that were asked. I want to make sure that we go through and that we honor what people said. So the next question had to do with the attractive lighting in US 42 corridor. And I don't want to go back and speak for you, but what I heard from that is that there is a study, and once that study has been completed, then you all can look at the what you might want to do in terms of the budget impacts and what makes the most sense and what part of these funds can be used or leveraged. Is that an accurate statement?
Can I tweak that just a little bit?
Yeah, I was
Yes.
gonna do that. You go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, Mayor.
You go ahead.
Okay, so what question two addresses is attractive lighting. And it addresses lighting in what we call Prospect Central. So basically from Fox Harbor to River Road.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so the US 42 safety study probably, I don't mean to assume this, but probably won't come back with a recommendation to put in attractive lighting. They very well could come back with recommendation, correct me, John, if I'm wrong, to add lighting at intersections. It'd probably be more commercial lighting, but what we're talking about in question two is something that would be like Simpsonville did, a 16-foot tall decorative Victorian or maybe something similar type of a lighting, but would also have the advantage of not just the aesthetics, but illuminating that section of kind of the central part of the city.
Okay.
Is that what, John, was that what you were going to say, or?
Yeah.
Okay. So let me just, in terms of US 42 lighting, let me ask you, from what I heard, the attractive lighting idea is something that you all are very interested in looking at. Is that correct?
No, I think that you'd have to say some of us are very.
I was just gonna
interested.
add that. Some of us are, yes.
Okay. All right.
Because the other component of that is when we start taking on an entire thing on a federal highway run by the state and say this little bitty city of Prospect will pay forever for doing this because we have to pay for the electricity. It's something that we need to think long and hard about. If
Okay.
what we're talking about is that the US 42 study will recommend lighting and we just make it prettier, I don't have trouble with that. There's a whole different ballgame there. One is a short-term expenditure of funds and the other is a commitment indefinitely.
I'd like
Okay.
to, in order to be really totally honest about this, obviously I'd like to see this, but we don't know what the study is going to say. So now we will, and we certainly will know before we do this, if we were to do it, but who's to say that sometime in the future that 42 might be widened or changed in some way? So if we did add the street lights, I want all my fellow council members to know this, that it's possible that we might have to pay to move them or some of them someday in the future. So that would be expensive. So yes, I'd like to see the lights, but we don't really have all the answers right now.
Sure. Okay. Would it be a fair statement? And listen, folks, this is your all's meeting. So my job is to kind of herd worms through here. I want to be sure I'm getting it right. Okay. So what I'm hearing is that, yes, this is something you'd be interested in, but this is not a top priority for ARPA spending at this time. You need more information. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think we just don't know enough.
Right.
I do think that in terms of sprucing up City Hall, that it would be a good thing for us to put some attractive streetlights in front of City Hall. If we do nothing else, I think we should do that.
Attractive streetlights around City Hall downtown?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Anything else on this particular? Let me swing back around and so what I'm hearing on lighting in terms of funding and priority and all that, there's a significant component of this that just needs more information. There's a piece of this that's waiting on a study, but the thought of maybe some attractive street lights and lighting around City Hall and in the downtown might be something worth looking at. Is that a fair summary for
I
some?
think so. I think so.
Okay.
That's a police chief denying responsibility.
All right.
Well, I'm not sure, at least in my case, I'm waiting to see the results of the study. And beyond that, I don't think there's any priority.
Okay. All right.
No, but we could incorporate that into making City Hall look like it's not falling apart. We could
You could.
add that as a
Well, sure.
component to
When
that.
you start defining projects,
It could be incorporated in there.
enlarge the
Mhm.
scope.
Right.
All right. And I just went ahead and made that. We'll come back to that, but City Hall was next to the last one, so I just went ahead and put it in that category. So go ahead. Did I interrupt someone? Okay. So the next thing that I didn't see the particular set of responses, but I'm going to ask. I'm going to make an assumption that question 3 that talked about lighting at Bridgepoint and US 42 is essentially the same kind of discussion. Is that correct?
It's a little different. Again, we don't know what's going to happen from the study, but the intersection at Bridgepoint is only, well, let's see, how can I put this? There is a Cobra style light, so I'll call it an industrial commercial style light that is between the Gene Snyder and Bridgepoint. If they were to have added just one more, then that would light up the Bridgepoint entrance. I think the study is going to come back with that recommendation. I don't think we'll have to pay for it. That's just one man's opinion, but I don't really think it's something that we need to address as a council out of our budget. So anybody else?
Okay.
That's good. That's fair.
Okay. And again, I'm just making notes, so I apologize for the long pauses. Okay. All right. The next one that seemed to have, 116 responses actually, had to do with improvements to neighborhood entrances, landscape lighting, signage, that sort of thing. It wasn't weighted as high, but there certainly was a lot of opinion about it. So what are your thoughts about the answers, that the responses that came in under that? Are there some things that rise to the top, or should some of this had to do with sidewalks too? There was another question about neighborhood sidewalks and repairing sidewalks. So how much of this is entrances and how much of this is sidewalks in your opinion? What are the things that should go
I
under?
don't know. I think sidewalks is separate from the appearance of the entrances. Now, the city does spend money every year on neighborhood entrances. And my opinion, the neighborhood entrances look good. I don't know if you were to allocate $100,000, let's say, to doing something with the neighborhood entrances that we don't do now. I don't know what that would be. Now, sidewalks is a separate thing.
Okay.
And,
All right, so
and
let's just leave that.
actually, agreeing with him and maybe expediting things, almost all of our entrances are on US 42.
Just
I
as a
will say
point,
that, go ahead, Frank.
while we're talking sidewalks, just as a point, Ron can tell us this, but I recall that he told me that we have about 33 miles of sidewalks in the city. And
No, that's incorrect. We have 33 miles of roadway in the city.
how many miles of sidewalk?
I do not recall offhand. I did measure it one day, but I don't have that in front of me.
Okay, my recollection is they were pretty close because out along places like Montero, where you have them on both sides of the road, that as Sutherland and those places. So just as a point of information.
And Innisbrook as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, but somebody made a comment that nobody repairs their sidewalks. People in my subdivision do and are required to.
The neighborhood entrances,
No,
I
we
wanted
do.
to,
The homeowner does.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, you said you're required to. You
It's
said-
an RC and RC.
Yeah,
It's an RC.
Okay.
or Chad, do you mind if I
Yes.
make a comment?
No, go ahead.
The neighborhood entrances, a lot of the written comments were about Fox Harbor and Hunting Creek, and those are the two oldest neighborhoods. And a lot, now whether you have to use ARPA funds or not is debatable, but a lot of them were, the city does spend money yearly on those to maintain everything that's around, but that's not changing anything. So a lot of the comments appeared to be about like the lighting of the signs were either obstructed by bushes or there's, dead things but a lot of it was, from what I recall, lighting or the signs are obstructed. That was for both Fox Harbor and Hunting Creek. I couldn't speak to whether no one put like the pavers into Hunting Creek, but I will say that's something that Frank and I drive over every day, and it does seem to be a problem. So, but I can't say if that was included in people's. No one wrote that specifically, but potentially that could be viewed as kind of the perception of the entrances and those being the two oldest
Gotcha.
areas. Yeah.
Sarah, let me say this about the pavers, and this addresses Frank's comment earlier. I drive over it every day too, and I've discussed it with Ron. And what we're going to have to do, and he's already working on this, is take those pavers out and replace it with concrete and stamp the concrete so it looks like pavers.
Right, good.
If I
Why do
might
we have to have
interject,
pavers?
I
Why
have
do we
a,
have to have pavers?
We don't, I didn't put them there. They were there when
know.
I got here.
I know, but I'm thinking that if we didn't have them at all, it might be better.
Well, we'll take out the ones that are deteriorating and causing a problem and get rid of them and concrete it over. The idea was to just stamp the concrete so it looked like papers. But if you don't want to do that, we won't do
Well,
it.
no, I think that's a great idea, but is that a valid use of the ARPA funds?
Yeah, we
Oh,
can
yeah,
use,
pavers,
sure.
sure,
Okay.
absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah, that's.
if I can interject, I do have a quote on that. It's for putting in a 7-inch deep reinforced concrete pad. And we're looking at about $13,000 per set of pavers.
And there are two sets?
Yeah, there are two sets, but
There-
it's only one set that's deteriorated to where it needs to be replaced now.
Actually, there are 4 sets. Well, there are 4, 2 sets, 2.
Oh, okay.
Are there 4 sets or 2 sets or 1 set?
At Hunting Creek, there are 4 sets, I believe.
All right. Anything else about the entrances? Okay, let's roll to see what time. Do y'all need to take a break?
Excuse me, just a second. One other thing about the entrances that I think that the safety study will address would be the entrance to Innisbrook, which is offset from the exit of Hunting Creek, which is a terrible traffic situation from a traffic engineering standpoint. And I don't know if that's part and parcel of the commentary on entrances, but I think it's something that when the study comes out, I don't know who we is, whether it's federal, state, metro, need to address.
All right. So it's 12:24. Do you want to take a 5-minute break? Or are you good?
I'm fine. I can, the others can, but I think it'd be a good idea.
Yeah, I think a short break would be good.
Okay, let's reconvene, say at 12:30. Is that okay? I have 12:24. Is that enough time? Or you want a 10-minute break?
No, it sounds good.
5 minutes
Okay,
is
thank
good.
you. Yep.
Two. Yeah. No,
Well, sitting here getting paid.
that's right.
Sandra,
Yes.
brought you a bag of books. They're up there by your desk.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Some of them might even be yours.
I have a puzzle for you. And it's not, the box is not in great shape, but it's definitely a Frank puzzle. You'll see
Really?
why. Yes.
I have an unbelievable amount of books downstairs in the basement. I've just been doing that.
Bringing them up and putting them upstairs on the desk. Do it. Our next book sale. That's okay. Well, there was a lot of, we'll do a sale twice a year from now on. And the next one will be, I think it's the second week in May.
Problem is every time I took one of them, I got to read them.
I know. I read an old Ellery Queen mystery the other day. Yes, I know exactly what.
The meeting City Hall, I planned on going up to your place. It was, so oh, okay, we'll catch it this week, but I've got a bunch of stuff I can bring with me. So I'll see you later. was going to be out to and since I'll see you tomorrow. I mean, we start looking at this stuff.
Yeah, I looked for mine. I can't find it. I know it's the same stuff.
Costing something exactly.
Mhm.
And a lot of this, and this, though they're only 116, I don't know what our population was. It was certainly not what it is today
Oh, yeah, it was. In fact, we've lost,
in 12 years.
in 10 years, we've lost the country. From one census to the next, we've lost approximately 100.
Okay, this was in, I guess that would be fairly close.
If you think about it, nothing came online in those 10 years of significance. All of Sutherland had been built out, most of Innisbrook.
Yeah.
Hey, Ron.
Ron, how many sidewalks?
Actually, I, instead of doing concrete, that's stamp stuff. We've got a drive of that stamped concrete. That doesn't last forever either. It's got it, but the stamping
Well, no,
seems to
but
be
the
done.
thing about it is, at the intersection of Portland cement concrete and asphalt, you are always going to have a problem. Always. And that's the problem you have there because
I'll
it's,
tell you what that part of the problem is. That is the absolute peak of Sand Hill. I'll bet there wasn't a decent infrastructure down underneath those,
well, we're,
because that was a long time ago. That was probably 62 when that road went in.
yeah, but the cobblestones went in under.
But I don't think they redid the substrate.
Well, cobblestones, by their very nature, are generally laid in on sand.
Sand,
Yeah.
Or on
Which
sand,
makes
sand
sense.
mortar mix or something like
But
that.
those weren't, I don't think they were. And they still
Well,
don't. make sense.
Ron could tell us that, I mean, because he's had to repair them a number of times.
So it's really 50,000, 13 times 4, 52,000.
Well,
Minimum.
the three of them
Minimum.
aren't bad.
Oh, okay.
It's where you come over the hill
Yeah.
coming out. You have
That little crest.
a change, you have a change in momentum of particularly heavy trucks.
Mhm.
And people start hitting their brakes there, which is another issue.
Mhm.
So
So you think we could get away with doing just one?
doing just one,
Okay.
but as you come into Honey Creek right now, as John will tell you, there's getting to be a big pothole.
Yeah.
Just as you start up the hill.
Do you know where there's big potholes is going into Clover?
Yeah, it's a huge one there.
There is, it's awful. Okay, we're down to one paver.
Hey, Frank, I could be wrong, but I think, isn't there there's two on the exit side with only one being bad? And I think there's only one on the entrance side in terms of sets of pavers. Are there two sets on the? It's funny that we drive it every day.
There's one upper and one lower.
Is there? Okay, I had that thought where I was
thanks.
like, well, I hear you all talking about it.
One for Sandra,
Oh, okay. Thanks, John.
and here's two more.
Oh, the thing for the bridge.
Okay, we're still on camera, by the way. This thing.
Yeah. I don't worry about that. So it's the
Sure.
sound.
That is,
Okay, is everybody about ready?
The boardwalk from City Hall over across Putney Pond was, Ron has scoped that out.
Is everybody back?
Let's see. All the members of the city council are back, so I guess yes.
Okay. All right, so we left off with the neighborhood entrances, and there's four sets of pavers. So y'all are going to, it's not necessarily a priority, but those are the ones. Those two areas, Fox Harbor and Hunting Creek, are the ones that have needed lighting, and there's bushes and obstructions and the pavers. So y'all were going to check on that. The next thing that I have on my list is, back up here. Street paving.
I have something I'd like to say about that.
Yep.
The last less than 2 years, year and a half, we have spent a lot of money on paving, and we've done a lot. We did all of Bridgepoint Boulevard. We did all of With Hill Circle and some other things. We did all of Fox Harbor Road, all of Gunpowder Lane, and all of Westover Drive. The most recent round of it with Gunpowder Lane, Fox Harbor Road, and Westover Drive, we spent almost $400,000 at one swoop. And that doesn't count what the others that I mentioned. We also currently have, I don't know the figure, John may have it, but in our road aid fund, we have maybe $130,000 accumulated. So my point is that we really don't need to devote ARPA money to street paving unless that's what we want to do.
Hello. I agree. We did, three of the council did an intensive survey several years ago, and we also looked at neighboring cities. And we are in much better shape because we have never stopped paving. Other cities have a 10 to 15 year date before they even look at it. And ours are done as needed and at least within 10 years. So I totally agree with the mayor.
The road aid fund has currently got a balance of 144,615.
Thank you.
I think those comments go to your earlier comments on the shortcomings of the survey, because I would warrant that many of the comments were from folks who do not understand what Prospect City's responsibilities are relative to the road, say Carslock Court or the road, or 42 or some of the other ones.
Yeah. Well, you all are in a much better position to know what kind of priority this is and what's been done in the past. And that's why I say, surveys are important and they give you a lot of good information and feedback. But they're not the be all end all. It depends on who the audience is. So, who the respondents are. So, those are judgment calls that you all can certainly make. It seems to me that the next couple of categories probably will be something that you'll want to spend a little bit of time on, and that is, one was neighborhood sidewalks and the other was repair existing sidewalks. And so from what I heard in the previous conversations, there are areas where there are new neighborhoods going in, and those need to have new sidewalks. And then you have quite a bit of sidewalks that already exist that need to be repaired. So let's start with with new sidewalks where sidewalks do not exist. Are there specific areas that you're thinking of that need to be at the top of the heap on this? What are the priorities?
Let's break that down into two components because they are required to be put in by the developer in the new areas. So if we're talking new sidewalks, we're not talking in a new development. We're talking existing area.
All right, I understand. Gotcha.
Ted, this is Doug Farnsley. I would again refer to that QK4 study from 2010, which lays out a very comprehensive plan, and it would have to be updated. Certainly the dollar estimates are going to be way off because we're 12 years down the road, but I think, and I don't think we would presume to tackle that whole plan, but I think as a starting point, we would work from that and then try to develop a plan to improve sidewalks over coming years.
Okay, so Yeah, and let me just make and maybe I should have said this at the very beginning, but I think that everybody knows this. I mean, we're in a work session today, and no kind of budgetary decisions and votes and that sort of thing can take place. I think that it seems to me that what we want as an outcome today is kind of a prioritization of the things that kind of rise to the top. But there's a number of these things that really are dependent on studies in progress. You know, getting bids, uh, and really knowing how much money you've got, and then making some judgment calls in terms of, are you going to spend it on something that has a one-time fix a problem, or is going to be multiple years and there's going to be ongoing maintenance, and it's going to come out of the city's general fund. So that's really, there's lots of things that are at play at this. And so today, what we really need to come out of this is, here are the things that are top on the priority list. And when we get the numbers on them, let's figure out how much we're going to spend and which ones can be funded. That's what I gathered when I first looked at the survey. I mean, there's no way to do every single thing that's on the survey. So with that being said, I want to clarify that I've got this correct, because we have this problem here in Lexington too, where we have neighborhoods that sidewalks were not installed. They weren't required of the developer. So this neighborhood sidewalks is really looking at those where neighborhoods already exist, but they did not put sidewalks in, correct? New
Yes.
development does require the developer to put in sidewalks. Is that correct?
Yes.
I think,
Okay.
yeah, and I think the QK4 study doesn't presume to suggest that we have sidewalks everywhere. That, for example, Westover Drive is a very wide street, and it's a place where it's safe to walk on the side of the street.
Mhm.
I think the specifics of that QK4 plan were aimed at connecting neighborhoods to one another and improving walkability in the commercial district. That's what, when I talk about, and I think, I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I've heard a pretty good consensus among our council members and from our citizens in the survey that that's something people see that as a priority, and
Okay.
not overnight, but over time.
Okay. Well, y'all make sure y'all.
Let me ask a question to Doug. What do the citizens see as a priority?
Well, my read of the comments and the very good collections of comments were put together was people want connectivity. They want to be able to get from one neighborhood to the other, and they want better.
I understand. But in terms of neighborhood sidewalks, is there any specific area of town that has cried out for sidewalks that doesn't have them?
John, I would just cite to the QK4 study, and it had some very specific proposals for locations of sidewalks.
Along 42?
I can't recall all the specifics, but it was a pretty good plan. And I don't have it in front of me, but that's where I would look to that as a guide, and we could fine tune it, or we could.
This last year, we were approached by the neighborhood association from the estates of Hunting Creek, where they do not have sidewalks. And they asked strongly to have certain things done, like getting Westover Drive paved, for instance, and one of their islands upgraded, for instance. But putting in sidewalks where they don't exist in the estates was not mentioned.
I agree with that 100%, John. It's not mentioned in the QK4 study. I don't think it's necessary in the estate section.
Did I mention one of the things that was in the QK4 study, that since a lot of stuff is on hold along US 42 based on until that study comes out, which will be over the summer and the fall, and then get an idea of what would actually occur. In a meeting with Tom Springer and David Reed, both from QK4, they did mention 2 items as far as connectivity when they looked back at the 2010 study and what they're currently looking at now, and 2 items that had come up before that they think that could be done, one at potentially no cost for connectivity. The first one was, they said that the state would probably, if asked, come and put the crosswalk from, there'd be a little infrastructure on each side that the city would have to do, but that the state, they could potentially approach the state to put in the crosswalk from Sutherland over into Prospect Point. That was something that got identified in the original QK4 study. And there were a couple comments on it in terms of being able to walk over to the shopping area. Again, there's some sidewalk completion and then some discussion with Prospect Point over how do you get into that particular area. But that Tom Springer and QK4 felt that no matter what happened at the River Road intersection, that that would be a positive enhancement and that there are very safe ways to be able to do it. Because obviously it got brought up, hey, people zip around that turn, et cetera. And they said, yep, as it is now, it obviously doesn't make sense, but that they don't put anything unsafe in. That was the first one. And then the second one that they said that kind of met the same objective was of the original study when they said sidewalks along 42, either on the business side or the residential side. But they said, hey, if you wanted to do something now that wouldn't be impacted at all by the 42, would be that boardwalk through Putney Pond. I'm not sure if anybody has any thoughts on those two particular items, but those are ones that I could see that if there was any interest that the city wouldn't have to kind of be on hold for what the fate of 42 was. I just wanted to mention those two.
Well, regarding the connectivity of Sutherland to Prospect Point shopping area, the Prospect Point Shopping Center is either in the process of being sold or has been sold. I've not been able to definitively determine who it's been sold to. The rumor that is going around is that it's going to be Publix. Whoever it is, there may be some cooperation between the new owner of that shopping center and getting this crosswalk done. So I just mentioned that.
You know, there were several comments along the connectivity. It's neighborhoods, but there were also several comments about connectivity between the commercial areas, that people would like to see a sidewalk or a pathway that would connect the Prospect Point Shopping Center to Kroger's. And right now, that could be 42, but there's a lot of in and out along that side of 42 with the strip malls. So right now, that's a complicated project to do because of the private property involved.
It's true.
Okay. Anything else on the neighborhood sidewalks?
Actually, what I'm hearing is that all of us are for connectivity. And because of the configuration of our city, it's a complicated and expensive activity. And we just plain don't know enough right now to know if it's a priority. So what if our priority was to have not an updated mobility study? Because I personally think that was not as focused as what we might expect to be done now. Something that will look at the whole city, but look at areas that are feasible to be connected within a relative time frame, like even 10 years. I think that mobility study had a lot of pie in the sky in it. But we could fund a study now that would make us more knowledgeable after it had been done.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, I agree. I think Sandra's exactly right. I think we need a study made of how you could put pedestrian access between Prospect Point area and the Kroger area. I mean, I don't have the solution to it, but there is one. And it would require somebody to do a study and tell us
And look at
who owns the property, what we would need to acquire in order to make that connection, pedestrian connection work.
I agree completely. I think the QK4 study gives us a very good starting point and really addresses a lot of those points, but obviously it needs to be brought up to date.
Well, and I'd like it to be much more specific.
Yeah.
It's pretty specific. I mean, it talks about very specific locations for sidewalks. talks about property owners, talks about what the city owns. There's a lot more there than you might think.
No, I've read it, that I still think that we want, one of my concerns all the time with studies are we get back something that doesn't have any step forward in it. It ends up being something that we agree with, we like it, it's good, but we don't have the first step to take to implement it. And I think I agree with the mayor. I'd like to see something that is very specific, and I'd also like to include getting people from the subdivisions, except for Bridgepoint and because it's got a problem, but getting the other subdivisions on 42 connected. As long as we're going to fund a study, I just as soon include those. Hunting Creek, the landing, Sparks Harbor.
If I could
I
make
don't
one
disagree with any of
recommendation
that.
that
I do think the existing study is a very good starting point, and I'm not sure there's as much additional work that needs to be done as you might think, but I'm certainly open to further study.
one item to mention, if I could just make a recommendation that not everybody in the room may be aware of, like I know Greg is, and Don might be, as part of the US 42 working group meetings. QK4 is looking at the commercial side more than just on US 42. Tom Springer's coming up with a few ideas that would not eliminate any of the entrances, because that's not going to happen, but a better way to connect vehicle access, which would then also change pedestrian access. So my only recommendation would be to, before hiring somebody to do that, is to check in with Tom Springer, because his ideas, if those come to fruition, would simplify a lot of this. And I think you all would like to be able to see those, because they're really simple, but really inventive in how to do it. And I think it'd be great if you guys could take a peek at those soon. He's still working on them. I think that's the only reason no one else has seen them.
Will we hear the results of the 42 study in what, September, October, November timeframe?
July.
I think it'll be earlier than that, Don.
So
It'll be this- I think it'll be this summer.
it would seem it would make sense before we go down the road of another study to hear the results of the study we're currently working on.
Agreed.
And I think the two specifics that Sarah mentioned, the crosswalk from Sutherland, from what I would call the back entrance. Is it Southwick? Is that the name of the street? Sedgwick. The crosswalk there with the flashing lights and good markings and so forth is a relatively inexpensive, good step. And then the Putney Pond boardwalk, if that turns out to be feasible, would be another very good step that would meet I think what the citizens are looking for, and what sounds like a lot of us on the council are looking for, begin the process of improving connectivity.
All right. Anything else on neighborhood sidewalks at the moment? Well, let's talk for a few minutes about repairing existing sidewalks. So there was let me ask you, has the city had an inventory taken of places, sidewalks where sidewalks need to be fixed, or any of that sort of stuff?
No.
Currently I have a company, Precision Concrete, is
Yeah.
in the process of doing a study right now and should have numbers shortly, I hope.
Okay. Great. Thank you for that. It was Precision Concrete. I know they're one of our partners. They've done a lot of work in a number of our cities. So they're doing a study. Then once you get that back, then you can really take a look at where the problem areas lie and prioritize those and decide whether and how you're going to fund them. Does that sound right?
That would be correct.
Okay.
Just one question. Are you separating out or showing in some way the sidewalks the city is responsible for the ones they are not?
We will when we get all the information in.
Okay, thank you.
Right now, it's still in the preliminary stage.
Uh-huh.
Any other questions about the existing, repairing the existing sidewalks? All right. Drainage issue, mitigate drainage issues. There were a lot of comments about this, and I know that you all have talked about it a little bit in our initial go around the room. What are the things that rise to the top here?
Well, here's the thing. In the year 2004, the city of Prospect entered into a contract with MSD. And under that contract, they agreed to take care of Prospect's surface water problems as they arose. In exchange for which the city of Prospect agreed to pay MSD so much a year for 10 years. I don't remember the exact figure, but over 10 years, it approached about $500,000, which we did pay. In addition, every other month, every one of us who lives here gets a bill from the water company, which includes charges for MSD. One of those charges is for handling surface water. Mine runs every other week or every other month. It runs $20-some. I did the rough calculation of what that amounts to since the year 2004. And it looks to me like the residents of Prospect have paid MSD approximately another $5 million for their taking care of our surface water. So I really don't think the city of Prospect should be spending its money, whether it's ARPA money or any other money, to do MSD's job. That's my position. Well, that was a showstopper.
Actually, I didn't realize the amounts were so high.
Well, I know we spent $500,000 under that contract, and I know that every other month, every damn one of us spends whatever shows up on our water bill year after year after year. And if you 5,000 residents, I don't know how many households that is, 2,200 households, it really comes to about $5 million on top of the $500,000 we already paid.
What, they were reneged on a payment.
Yeah, they did. And Chris Gorman and I went down and met with them, and they had their lawyer there, and she pointed out that under that contract, it said, according to our practices. And their practice is not to do it. So,
All
you
right.
know, we can wind up spending more money in court if you want to. I don't know. That's the situation. I don't think we should be spending Prospect money wherever it comes from to do MSD's job.
Okay. Are there any other thoughts on drainage issues?
It's a small problem, but it didn't happen this winter. The bridge over Heritage Creek, if it snows a lot, there is no way for that snow to drain off of that bridge. So it accumulates. And if it happens to freeze and then thaw, then you have an ice skating rink right across the bridge. So one of the thoughts, I think it was the mayor that happened, I guess a year or so ago, was to do something with that bridge. So I don't know if this is a good time to bring that up or not, but if it could be done with maybe some arches such that the snow and water would flow off and into the creek, then that might be something to consider. So
Tell me which bridge we're talking about.
I'm sorry, the
Heritage Creek.
Heritage Creek Bridge, as 42 crosses over.
Oh, okay.
The pink one,
What is it?
the pink one.
The pink one,
It's coming off,
the pink
so-
bridge.
It's beige, right?
So.
Well, wouldn't that be appropriate, subject matter
It-
for the safety study?
It is actually. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. Thank you.
Well, and
All right.
needs to be funded.
Okay. Let me, is there anything else about mitigating the drainage issues? The next one that's on the survey are library updates and improvements. Any thoughts on that?
Since I'm the library lady, my thought is that we don't need ARPA money for the library. We are the least expensive benefit that Prospect gives. A great deal of what we do, the work is all done primarily by volunteers, and we lease our books. We're on the verge of an exciting announcement, probably next week. And we really don't need ARPA funds for anything. We have 2 used book sales a year, and in all honesty, the small things we need, we fund with the money from the book sales.
Okay. All right.
I'd just like to add, it's one of Prospect's best resources that we have for our residents, and it's used a lot.
Great.
An interesting commentary from several folks was, do we really have a library? Where is it?
Yeah.
You be careful, you bring them in, I'll give them a guided tour.
These are the recorded comments.
Yeah. All right. The next thing was a pavilion, and you'll have to educate me on LHCP. I missed it somewhere. What does that mean? Is that? I
Oh, I'm
assume that's what it's
sorry.
called.
Little Hunting Creek Park is a small park adjacent to City Hall.
Got you.
So,
Yeah, this started out with proposal to put a small playground in there. The council was evenly divided on doing that, but it has gone forward. So that is part of the proposal for Little Hunting Creek Park. The rest of it involves walkways, an expanded parking lot, and originally putting a gazebo down there. And I thought about a gazebo. And they're pretty. We've got one up at Cali Park, but you really can't do much with them. So I thought, well, maybe we ought to put a pavilion in there, and we could have concerts, maybe plays, get the Louisville Orchestra to send out here, maybe get Shakespeare in the Park to come out here and do things and have a facility that we could actually use. And that's what that's about.
Okay.
And the connectivity between the landings across Putney Pond to the rear of City Hall would figure into that. It would make it more accessible. It would make it accessible, pedestrian accessibility from that neighborhood over to here. It's easily accessible from Fox Harbor, somewhat accessible if you come down through Fox Harbor to Hunting Creek. Would be, as Herb Schulhafer mentioned an hour or so ago, sort of a central place for our community. And that's what that's about.
Okay, I got you. Thank you for clearing that for me. Are there any other comments about that particular item?
And I'll mention that we've got a substantial budgeted item for the improvements to Little Hunting Creek Park. And I think the idea is to use a portion of the ARPA funds to supplement that to improve it that much more.
How much money are we talking about?
Out of ARPA money, I would say about 200,000.
How much is the pavilion altogether?
Pavilion itself is something less than 200,000, 170 maybe. That includes electrical and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. All right. Anything else on the pavilion?
I think the pavilion is a little bit like the library. It's another asset to develop the city hall area as a destination for the city residents.
All right. All right. The next category. Let's see, did I miss one? Park, bikes and pathways.
Give me some good.
So there we are. Okay. So there were some comments that came, responses came in under question 15 about bike and pathways and walkways to Little Honey Park. Is there anything else that needs to be said about accessibility and connectivity with Little Honey Park or any of the other parks? Is
I
there
would
anything
say
that we've missed?
only if anybody wants to talk some more about the proposal that originated with Don Gibson and is a good idea, in my opinion, to put a boardwalk behind City Hall and across Putney Pond into the landings. And that's about something like a $200,000 project that would provide pedestrian access from the landings over to City Hall.
Okay.
Actually, just one thing, the bike path thing sounds wonderful. But if you look at the roads that would feed bikes into what we're talking about, there are some serious engineering issues to be dealt with.
What roads?
Well, if you're talking about bike paths, you're going to have to come down Fox Harbor Boulevard, which is not the widest or straightest street. And if you start putting a bike path on the side of that, I think we need to take a look at that. I think there's a problem.
Yeah,
What
very-
biker would drive up?
I'm very concerned generally about mixing cars and bicycles. If you've ever driven River Road, you know what I'm talking about. And when I see somebody bicycling on US 42, it looks like a suicide mission. It's just crazy.
I agree with you. So when we're talking about walkways or sidewalks, I'm on board. When we're talking about bike paths, I think it's very complicated. And I have major problems with it for the reason you stated.
You and I totally agree.
Okay, we do.
So really, it sounds to me, what I'm hearing is that there seems to be a lot of support for walkways and hiking trails and that sort of stuff, but the bike pathways are a lot more dangerous and more complicated, and you really want to take a thorough look at that before you proceeded. Is that a fair assumption?
I think that's totally accurate, not even an assumption. Reflection. Yeah.
All right, good. Anything else on bike paths and walkways before we move on? Okay. Park infrastructure, and somebody mentioned that right at the top of our discussion about infrastructure within the parks. And so I guess my question there is there anything additionally that you want to add to this this category, or do you want to further define it? What's meant by infrastructure? Are you talking about pathways, walkways? Are you talking about gardens? Are you talking about water? Are you talking about restroom facilities? Are you talking about what are you talking about on infrastructure for parks?
One of my major concerns is that we never build in accessibility. We have many of our citizens are mature. I won't call them old. And we have not built in any of the thoughts for accessibility into our parks. And I would hope if we talk about things like the boardwalk and everything else, we don't make 5 steps to get up onto the thing. I want us to think about who is not using these now. I know somebody mentioned a lot of young children, but in great part, a lot of our younger homeowners we aren't getting more And very often they're moving to Oldham County for a lot of reasons. And so we need to realize that the people that are staying here for 20 years are very often mature, and we need to work on not just handicapped accessibility, because we don't have that at all either, but we need to look at what we're doing to make things easier for our residents.
I concur.
Okay. Anything else on infrastructure or parks?
This is Chris.
Okay. City tree enhancement. I know we mentioned trees at the beginning. That the recently planted trees that need watering, and probably at some point perhaps an outside contractor to do that. Is there anything else in terms of tree planting or becoming? Well, I don't think it's out there. Is there anything else about trees that you would like to discuss?
I think that we have been taking good care of the forestation board and the tree matters in our general budget. It hasn't been that expensive. Lee's on the screen right now. He can agree or disagree. But in my view, we're doing fine as far as trees.
Okay. Any other comments about that one?
I just want to add that Lee and his board are all volunteers, give generously of their time to keep us well treed and watch out for dangerous trees and all that kind of thing. They do a good job.
Good. All right. So the next question dealt with updating City Hall. We've had quite a bit of discussion about that on 2 or 3 occasions. So one of the things was the roof leak. Then there was painting, and there was also street lighting around City Hall, perhaps as an upgrade. It could be a part of a broader beautification project in the downtown. Is there anything else we want to add to that that hasn't been mentioned?
Well, I don't have a dollar figure on painting City Hall. I personally think it's a great idea. I've talked with other people on the council or the city attorney and so forth who also think it's a good idea. I would be in favor of spending ARPA money to spruce up City Hall. We are, as soon as the weather permits, we're going to be redoing, and this is already in the budget, we're going to be redoing the parking lot around City Hall and building some concrete barriers to hold the edges of it. But that money's already been appropriated. We can use ARPA money to do that if we want to. But I do think that spending money from this ARPA fund to beautify City Hall is a good idea. We were supposed to have a meeting already with the painting contractor to get a dollar figure. I think what happened is I was scheduled to give a deposition at the same time. That deposition got postponed at the last minute, but that's the reason the meeting didn't happen when it was supposed to. We're scheduled to meet with that painting contractor next week to get a figure on how much he says it would cost to paint City Hall.
And do the shutters.
And do the shutters. As far as repairing the roof, that's Ron Cunniff's already working on that. Again, the council's going to have to decide whether they want to spend the amount of money it would require to, where the leak is in the roof is at the cupola. And the simple fix is just to remove the cupola. But maybe some people are in love with the cupola and don't want to remove it. So we'll have to decide what to do there.
Sure. Okay. And we've mentioned the safety study a number of times. Is there anything else that needs to be added as far as talking points with the safety study?
Can we talk just for another second about City Hall?
Yes, of course.
I tend to agree with the comments overall about needed improvements. The building, as a lay person looking at it as from a design standpoint, seems to be somewhat of a disaster. and it's way out of date. But I would be inclined to get an architect in for us to consider getting an architect in to tell us, here's some simple fixes, here's some more substantial plan. Boy, you've got big problems over here. Just somebody who's a professional who could guide us in this process. I'm a little uncomfortable with Doug Farnsley picking out paint colors or shutters or that sort of thing. So I would.
We are too. That's why we didn't ask you.
Well, I get it. I get it. And I'm much more comfortable with you all having that discussion than with me having that discussion.
Well, I know just the architect to approach, Doug.
Okay, good. Good.
All right. Anything else on City Hall? All right. What about the safety study? We've talked about it a lot. Is there anything that hasn't been discussed that you see under the comments or that you just thought of as we've had our discussion today? Is there anything that needs to be added or said more about the safety study?
Not so much about the safety study, but one of the other sets of comments that relates to that is that there were at least 4 or 5 comments that talked about looking at the striping that has not been done on some of our streets next to stop signs, at looking at some of the outdoor signs that need to either be replaced or refurbished. So they're general maintenance issues, but they're ones that need to get done.
Okay.
And then, Mr. Long, there was, in addition to, I think what you're asking is, are there any other topics that we should add to these 14 that are on the survey? So we have the 2 that were just brought up, but also during our discussions, and it's not in the survey per se, is a tax break or somehow money back to the citizens in some fashion. So just wanted to get that in there as a topic.
Got it.
And that's one of the legal questions that we're going to have to look at to see whether under the ARPA rules that is permitted.
Sure. Let me, y'all haven't hired me for my advice and I don't intend to give it today, but I will say this, in some of the other cities that I've worked with, that there are some cities that are doing, not related to ARPA, but they are doing rebates, and they're doing some stuff with small locally owned businesses and all sorts of things. One of the cities that I've worked with was talking about this issue. And so they took the various revenue streams that they have, and their CFO or your CPA or whoever does your books, they projected out the impact of both raising and lowering the rates and leaving them the same, so that they had a comparative set of numbers looking out 20 years. And so, I live in Lexington, and we got a $500 million assessment for storm drainage, and so I love paying that, as you can imagine. But so I think that the discussion that you want to have is important, and this is an obvious time to have it. I would urge you strongly to take a look at the impacts of that, not just in the immediate term, but over the long term as well. Those are things that you can always reduce them, but raising them back up is very difficult. So I'm not in favor for or against. I just know when I look at the budget or the info that there's a lot more to it.
Ted, I would add to that. When I think of a tax break with ARPA funds, and I don't know the legalities of it, but I was thinking of a one-time deal or something to help people with the extreme inflation we're experiencing, and with the influx of dollars, perhaps we can cut some people a break.
Yeah, I mean, there's all
in,
kinds of ways to do that. Sure, like a holiday, tax holiday, and that sort of stuff. Yeah, sure.
If it could be done, yeah.
Yeah,
That's really what I had in mind.
sure. As a citizen, I'm for it. Uh, okay, is there anything else? There are some things in here was about police patrols and traffic enforcement and those sorts of things. I just want to be sure that we cover everything, even if it was not specifically listed. Are there other things that you want to add to this list?
I agree. I'm glad you brought up police because the most important thing to our residents is safety, and our police department is amazing. And if there is something that they need, we have just given them some things, but if there are some other things that they've been hesitant to ask for, we need to incorporate it into our thinking.
And if we have the funding, a comprehensive look at the aging of our fleet, whereas, they might not be ready for a year or two, but plug that in if ARPA funds can accommodate it.
Okay, good. All right.
Talking about police cars.
Yes.
Anything else?
What about funding an additional couple of officers to focus on nothing except enforcing the speed limit on 42?
I'm not sure we can totally do that. If we could, it's fine.
That's a loser for us, isn't it? I mean, the time it takes to issue tickets, and then our officers have to show up downtown.
Actually, what if instead of dealing with it from that perspective, what we dealt with was, what can we do that may not include a person and a ticket? Are there other, for example, I just went through a neighborhood yesterday where there's a sign that pops up that tells me I was speeding.
Oh, that's going through Green Spring.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what if we do what both of you want to from a different way?
We got a sidebar going here.
That's okay. I hear traffic calming and slowing people down, and listen, I have it in my neighborhood too. We have it all over town.
Well, without knowing what Kentucky law is relative to photo enforcement, I think that would be a really sound investment if we could do it here. I know they do it in Florida because caught.
I can testify they do it in DC.
Yeah, we got it in California too. I got it.
So, I mean, that would be worth exploring, and I think that would be something that our citizens would really appreciate.
Maybe that's a subject for a separate meeting, just where we talk about.
Yeah.
With our police.
Yeah, there's one other thing that I think is outside the box probably and falls in Linda's area, but looking at purchasing the piece of property that's the impediment to really utilizing Putney Pond.
Are we talking about the lot next to City Hall?
Yeah, the one behind us here.
We own the one behind us to the creek. It's the one next to us.
The house that you get the entrance off of, where the Putney Pond,
Oh, I see what you're saying. It's way up on the side.
it's up on the side.
I have wanted to pick it back.
That's an extreme impediment to
Yeah, it is.
connectivity between Fox Harbor and the landings.
Yeah, it is.
Is that something that you want added to this list?
I think it's something worthwhile.
Okay.
I mean, if
Actually,
connectivity,
what if we just say, adding property purchases to enhance
Or
connectivity?
buying an easement.
buying an easement.
It's not a good time to buy. It's just.
I think I've gotten it written well enough. There we go. All right. So, is there anything else before I start talking about process for whittling this down? We've got a lot of stuff on the plate. So there's a couple of things that I wanted to accomplish right off the bat. And the first one was the initial walkthrough that we did with each person presenting their own ideas for what was important to them. For me, that kind of establishes a baseline for what the priorities are. As we've gone through this exercise, it's really apparent to me that there are many things that are dependent upon studies, estimates, bids, cost, and ongoing costs. So, putting those as priorities before you have the numbers, I think is a very difficult thing to do. You know what your ARPA funds are going to be. So I think that what's needed next is some guidance, and this is completely your all's decision, of what are the things that float to the top of the list that can be done, or once you get the numbers, will be done. Understanding that we can't vote today, can't take official action, and I don't think you would want to, but there is not anything that prevents us from having a discussion, an informal discussion about the top items. There were some things you told me specifically that you're not, don't think there's funding needed for. But what I've heard are walkability, connectivity, and the sidewalks. I heard that loud and clear, and I think that I have a pretty good grasp of what was included in your all's priorities for those. The second thing that I heard is considering the what the city can do in terms of a tax break, tax holiday, tax rebate, and the impacts that would have and how much that would cost both now and in the future. The third thing that I heard was the neighborhoods that already exist but were developed without sidewalks, and trying to figure out, get your arms around a cost figure for that, and devising some way over time to mitigate those risks. The next thing that I heard was City Hall, and there's both external and internal appearance items, and integrity items as far as like the roof leaking and those sorts of things, and also making that a broader project that might include improved street lighting, decorative lighting, and that sort of things in the downtown area to enhance the appearance of the city. The next thing that I heard a number of times was the connectivity from Hunting Creek, Fox Harbor, City Hall, to the landings of Putney Pond. And that seemed like an area of interest that came up several times, that you just need to get your arms around what the costs and ongoing costs of that would be. Lighting, there were two kinds of lighting. One is the KIPDA study that will be the pragmatic lighting that's not fancy. And then the other is areas that you want to put in decorative lighting, for example, the way that they did in Simpsonville. Highway 42 is an issue. There are a number of things there, but some of that is out of your control. That's a federal highway. I'm just going back through the street paving. No ARPA funds needed for that. The library has no needs. Mobility was mentioned. I think I see it 3-4 times for the parks. In general, ADA, the Americans with Disability Act, and senior citizens access to public spaces, and then something that has not been explored, but a discussion needs to be had with the police department about anything that they might need, and the bikeways and walkways and pathways. So pathways, walkways, yes, and the cost is about $200,000. There's more concern about the complications of mixing cars and bicycles, and so that's just a discussion that you all have to you'll have to look at the safety study to see that. And then that's what I heard. Did I miss anything?
I don't believe you mentioned Little Hunting Creek Park.
I've got, let me see. There were two things about Little Honey Creek Park. Let me find them.
The pavilion and the boardwalk.
Okay, so yes, Honey Creek Park, new parking area, the sidewalk, yeah, from the city hall, sidewalks, connectivity and lighting, and there was another time that it was mentioned. Find the other one, the pavilion in Honey Creek Park. It started with a proposal to put a small playground at the park, but really a pavilion would be great, and pedestrian access from most neighborhoods would be fairly easy. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. In terms of the priorities, we can do this 2 or 3 different ways. We don't have an easy way of voting what the priorities are, but I'm going to ask you if is it reasonable to assume that some of these things will be priorities depending on how much money is available and how much the budget estimates come back in on implementing them. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely.
So if I organize these comments, the way that I've got them right now is the first list is what each of you told me that were your top 2 or 3 or 1 or however many it was. If that's the first list of priorities that you want to consider, and then the second list would be organized by topic from the survey, and you can pick 1, 2, or all once you know the numbers and match that to the available funding. To me, that sounds like the easiest way to do it to me, because without the numbers, it's really hard to decide, how you want to divvy it up. Any comments or feedback about that?
It does seem like,
Oh, sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
yeah, sorry, I was just gonna say, I just did some quick math off of some initial numbers that got thrown out there. Those would be all subject to change, and that was, a little over half of the amount of funds. So I think it sounds like getting the estimates for everything, and we may be on our way to a decent long-term plan for all the funds potentially, but from my perspective, it does sound like the more definitive numbers, at least ballpark, how many zeros are after some of these things, would be good to know. Because we might be able to do more than we think potentially.
Absolutely. Well, I have found that this exercise is always helpful, even if you don't have the budget numbers, because now each of you know where each other kind of stands and where there's consensus and agreement on the things, and where there might not be as great a need. So you can kind of prioritize them that way. So are there any other comments on that? I mean, I don't want to make any assumptions here, and I don't want to cut off discussion before we're done. I want to make sure that we've gotten, all your thoughts on it. And are we getting you to where you want to be? Is this what you expected as an outcome from this meeting?
Yeah, yes. Mr. Long, I don't know if this would fit in. I don't want to mess up with, I'm sure you have a great process to take us through, but it occurs to me that we could group some of this stuff together. When we talk about Little Hunting Creek Park, we're talking about bringing citizens to Little Hunting Creek Park, and then while they're here, things that they can do. So the pavilion sort of fits under that umbrella. The connectivity from certain HOAs, or excuse me, subdivisions to Little Hunting Creek Park fits under that umbrella. So to me, maybe we could group that under a heading, and if we did that, we sort of really have it down to connectivity, tax breaks, all things related to Little Hunting Creek Park, and making that a central hub and bringing people to that central hub, and then parks. Can we do that? Or is that mess
Yes.
things up?
No,
Just, I don't know, it's just my way of thinking of it, but
no, I think that you're right, because what had had occurred to me is that once we wrapped up the discussion about it, is, where are the things that fit into 4 categories? I mean, I think that's what you're saying. Some of these things, they're all interconnected and related. And that starts to then kind of weave in a narrative of, how much does it cost to do all the things that we want to do that impact Honey Creek Park, or, that connects the city hall with the landing and those sorts of, so you start grouping things. So we're thinking very similarly here. It seems to me it's so. Let's I'm looking through my list here. I think that at this point, what we can do, we can sit here and work on this collaboratively, or we can take a stab at it and gather the things under those 4 or 5 broad topics, and put together a list from that way. Would that be more efficient for you? And we work back and forth that way?
But are we talking about doing that in the absence of knowing the amounts of money?
So what we're talking about doing is really just, it's the way we organize stuff. I don't think that there's any way, well, there's not any way to prioritize a list of 40 things necessarily before you know what they're going to cost. You may, it may be better to spend and prioritize 10 things that cost $1 million than it is for 2 things that cost $1 million. I think until you know what the cost of each of these things are, it's going to make it very difficult.
I absolutely agree with you.
Another thing that you might do too, in terms of putting these pieces together, is looking at just like you've got tranches of funding coming in, over a 2-3 year period. You can also do things in phases. So there might be other funding available for some of the parks, or some of those kinds of issues, like land and water conservation grants. Maybe there's I mean, this would certainly give you time to find additional mechanisms that are permitted under the ARPA funding. Some of them won't let you do matching, but that might be another way to approach it.
That's right.
What are your thoughts?
Ted, speaking of budgeting, I've budgeted time for this meeting, and I'm well past the time that I've budgeted.
Sure.
So this has been, I mean, to me, it's been very helpful, and I appreciate your involvement and the council members' involvement. I feel like there are going to be some differences among us on some of the specifics, but I think we've all heard things where there's probably more common ground than I thought we might have. So I'm real appreciative, and to you and the council members and the mayor, our staff, our citizens.
Well, I appreciate that, Doug. And again, my big thing when we were doing these kinds of meetings is that if you don't have specific numbers to work with, it's you can have priorities, but one priority might take out the whole thing of money. So
Exactly.
Today, what you've done is you've heard consensus, I think, pretty clearly about some things. And once you get the budget numbers on them, then you'll be able to go back through the list and say, yeah, we've got enough, and let's do this and this and this and this, and build on it from there. I'm glad to work through that with you again, but I really think that you all have the ability to take what we produced today and turn that into an action plan going forward once you have your numbers. That's what I think.
Okay, I think we all agree with that.
Okay. All right. Well, we will get these, we'll get the notes consolidated and all that, and we'll get that back over to you. And then, y'all can begin looking at what you want to get bids on, or put out your RFPs and get estimates and all that, if that's fair.
That's good.
Listen, I really appreciate your patience today. and your commitment of time. And I hope that this was helpful to you. And I'll be following up with you here in a couple of days with our report. Okay.
Thank you.
Ed.
For,
Thanks,
thank you for
Sarah.
doing such a good job with us.
Thank you so much. Y'all were easy to work with. I appreciate that.
Thanks for coming out,
Ted.
Mr. Long. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
everybody.
Sure.
See you all.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Waiting for that. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
What took you so long?